let's talk about the anatomy of a measure. So this is the measure resource in its most simple form, trust me. There's lots of stuff that goes in there, but here's some important aspects to it. And it does very much, if you can like get into the details, it does very much look like a measure specification that you might be used to from HEDIS or CMS or whoever's state programs that are creating measures. It's going to have your author, your description, lots of information about when it was created, who created it, what's the eligibility period for it. And then you have your library, which I'm going to go into more in a second here. And then, like I said earlier, the measure actually dictates what the output looks like. So it doesn't contain the measure report, which could be confused here. It actually just contains enough information to know what the measure report will look like. So it's the format and the scoring. And then, of course, there's parameters. What's the measurement period? What's, do we want to filter by some sort of social determinant of health or whatever? So that way you get a different set of data based on the parameters. Now, the library is the most important part. That's why I've highlighted it. Next slide. So as we move over, you can see I have the library now. Inside of the library, it's a separate resource in FHIR. It contains the CQL, and then we'll talk about that in a second. The data requirements I mentioned earlier, and it's going to be all of the information about what elements, what FHIR elements, resources, what's necessary to execute this library. And then you'll have dependencies. So I mentioned modularization earlier when it comes to a measure. And this is the same thing that I was talking about earlier. There's libraries, references inside of a library. And the reason for that is that you'll share a particular set of logic amongst multiple measures. So if the way at which you want to check for medications is the same across all of the measures, then you would put that in maybe its own library and use that in multiple different measures. So that's what this dependencies refers to, is other libraries that are dependent on this one for a shared reason. And then, of course, value sets. We of course need to check that value sets are matching the data criteria that we've trying to execute against. So you need a reference to those value sets that will be necessary. And so right here in this library is everything you need to know about executing the library itself. It's all the requirements. So dependencies are requirements as well. And then, of course, parameters are basically just what you're passing forward from the measure. There may be other parameters that are eligible, but it's the same idea. We're passing that information down so that way you can filter on certain criteria that are allowable for the library or measure. Now, the CQL, clinical quality language. Next slide. This is what it looks like. And this is the actual both machine readable and mostly human readable logic that will execute and filter and give you the data for the initial population of a patient. So if you were to pass a patient through this measure and their age was whatever minimum years, which I think is 2 for this measure, this is a LSC HEDIS, then those patients would come through to the next phase, which is the denominator. And so it's just basically the same that you're used to reading in the specifications today in time. It's a little different, but it's the same idea. And behind the scenes, what's happening is that there's all these filters and basically call them queries, retrieve statements that will go through and slice and dice this data so that way it comes through and meets the measure.